So now we're going to take questions. Yes.
I'm from University of Missouri, St. Louis. So my question is for Mustafa, and I have two quick caveats. One, I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to read the paper ahead of time, so maybe it's already in there. And two, this isn't exactly my research area, so sorry if it's a naive question. But if I understand correctly, one of the key punchlines of your paper is that deposit betas differ based on how high or low interest rates are. And so to me, a natural extension of that would be, are deposit betas different based on whether deposit rates are increasing, based on whether interest rates are increasing or decreasing. Another way of putting it is, in the accounting literature, when we have sensitivity of earnings to, sensitivity of something to earnings, there's usually a variable to capture whether it's negative earnings or positive earnings. So my question to you is, have you thought about whether interest rate increases or decreases should be modeled kind of separately in terms of capturing deposit betas?
Thank you very much for your question. Currently, it's not on the draft, but we are working on an extension where we are separately looking at the time periods where interest rates are either increasing. We are separately treating rate hike periods and rate decline periods. Rate decline periods is usually crisis periods, and the behavior is very different. One thing we observe is when rates are increasing, we see that deposit betas tend to start with below 1, and you may see the change on the deposit beta can be above 1. So there's some variation over there that we are trying to address in the next iteration. But thank you for the great question.
Yeah.
I have a quick question for Edward. By the way, I'm Kathy Zhang from University of Florida. So as depositors, I think we can perfectly diversify on our own, right? Let's say if I have $1 million cash, which I don't, I can perfectly diversify my $1 million into 4 different baskets or 4 different banks to start with. So I think that's the starting point for your study, right? If I perfectly diversify as a depositor, the banks do not have to diversify or participate in that program. So I'm not so sure how depositor diversification or a depositor sophistication would interfere or come into play with your study.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that point up. So it's a really great question. So the way we think about depositor kind of diversification and the cost of diversifying is that when banks offer this facility, they get to retain that one customer. So that $1 million account, the bank actually has full kind of control over managing that account. So from a customer's perspective, it actually is preferable in our mind to have a relationship with one bank instead of having to split it across 4 banks. And the question becomes, the implications become stronger for, let's say, small businesses with payroll accounts. As soon as you hit, 5 million, 10 million, then you're thinking 30, 40, 50 banks, where if you want to fully diversify, the cost of doing so, the monetary, but also time costs are very large. So this new market really addresses that, because all you need to do is tell your bank that you want this facility and as kind of part of your relationship. And the kind of heightened interest in this market has really come up since the SVB crisis, because now banks do recognize, and depositors also recognize, that this can be a very real constraint. But thank you for your comment. I appreciate it.
Yeah, hi. Jill Satina from Texas A&M. I had a question to all of the panelists, really. I think it was Mustafa who had a nice slide that sort of showed the frequency with which on earnings calls there were questions about deposit beta. So as deposit beta became more and more, I'll call it an observed thing for banks in the market, do we think that earnings crediting rates may have changed, and so that we can't really truly infer what was going on with deposit beta? So specifically what that speaks to is whether banks were, in effect, taking discounts in terms of some of these other services they provide customers in order to be able to show the market lower deposit rates. So the only thing we could really observe would be changes in ROA. Just a question, how you may have thought about this particular thing in terms of earning crediting as an offset.
This is a great question. In the paper, we look at the relationship with return on equity and deposit betas, and we expected not to find a relationship if we assume that deposit franchise is a natural hedge, but that was not the case. With respect to earning calls, we also look at the content of the discussions, whether the banker is talking about deposits with what. And what we find is usually deposit discussions are related with bank's interest margin. But that's something we didn't really dig down in detail.